Peace, peace, family. Welcome to Yemima's World, the Jelly Moose's Cafe. I am your hostess, Yemima, and it is good to be black in the land of the living once again. So today's episode is called The Insane Spirituality of Freedom. Let's get into it. I don't want to belabor it, and I don't want to keep you long on this Monday afternoon, this Moon Day afternoon. So, what is the insane spirituality of freedom? So, July is Minority Mental Health Awareness Month. And I did not know that before this month, this year, rather. I didn't know that. Um, and when I hear the word minority, I automatically think of African Americans because we were the first minorities in this country. Um, Once we were minorities for a very long time, this country started to see that we were getting things that they thought we did not deserve. And so to curtail that, to limit what black people, what African Americans would get in this country, they started to add more to the definition of what a minority was. And then all of a sudden white women became minorities, and they started to get a lot of things that should have been given to black people. White women started getting them, and also immigrants started coming in more so, and they were considered minorities. People with disabilities are minorities. Now the LGBTQ community is minority. So with each minority that is layered, with each year, with new people claiming to be or identifying as certain things, each minority that comes in, it pushes the black people all the way down to the bottom of the totem pole. So all the other minority groups will get all of the benefits before it comes to African Americans. But I digress. So July is Minority Mental Health Awareness. In the black community, mental health is not discussed, talked about, or help gotten to those that need it as readily as it is for other ethnicities. Um, Mental health for anyone that needs it should get the help. But for African Americans, mental health could be inherited, and it could be inherited from slavery. Because there is no way in hell that people could honestly believe that you can work from sun up to sundown every single solitary day for your entire life under the yoke of chattel slavery and not have it affect you mentally. And so it did affect us mentally. And we, the descendants of those that were enslaved, we have inherited a lot of that PTSD. We've inherited a lot of that mental health, or different abilities, I should say. We've inherited a lot of it. So back prior to the Civil War, there was a doctor named Samuel Cartwright, and I use the word doctor loosely. I don't know what the hell he was. Spawn of Satan. I don't know. But he came up with a disease. Yeah, he just kind of invented a disease. There were no symptoms of this particular disease evident. I'm getting ready to get to that. But he created this disease back in right before the Civil War. Okay, so here are the symptoms of the disease. If black people who were in bondage, who were in chattel slavery, who were under the yoke of an oppressor and an enslaver, if they wanted freedom, if they no longer wanted to be oppressed, if they no longer wanted to be under the yoke of slavery, if they no longer wanted to be bondage, if they no longer wanted to work from sun up to sundown 6 days a week, if they no longer wanted to be, you know, be free, uh, or not be free, then they were considered insane. Insane. And so Dr. Samuel Cartwright, or I should say Buckler Cartwright, Seaman Demon Cartwright, came up with a name for this anomaly of wanting to be free, of not wanting to be enslaved anymore. And he called it drapetomania, Draptomania. And so when runaways or self liberators would leave the plantation prior to the Civil War, if they were caught, a lot of times they were institutionalized. They had buildings that were set up. There were insane asylums for the feeble-minded, or insane asylum again for drapetomania. So, someone who owned or someone who enslaved an African, when they caught them, they could put them in the insane asylum for however long their oppressor deemed that they need to be there. And better, like some movies say, get your mind right. They wanted them to get their mind right. And I don't know what went on in those insane asylums back then. I can only imagine that there was torture, um, torture enough that you would want to go back to the plantation. And then that would prove Dr. Samuel Cartwright that he was correct. See, I told you they was insane. Look at it. Now they want to come back to the plantation. I told you it's just a, temporary insanity. You know. So for years and years, our ancestors, again, those that chose to self-liberate, that would get caught and come back to the plantation, they would go to these insane asylums. Of course, you know that some of them did not make it out. So the tortures probably ended up killing them. But that is what drapetomania is. And it was basically for a long period of time, for several years. Again, this was prior to the Civil War. When the Civil War came and African Americans got their quote unquote freedom, they could no longer lock them up for that particular reason. They could no longer put them in an insane asylum for that particular reason. So they had to come up with other reasons to admit them to the insane asylum. Basically, it was just another way of enslaving them. Also, with the prison system, also, so you had the prison system locking up people, and you had the insane asylum. Now, both locked black people up for basically the same reasons. You could either go to jail or you could go to the insane asylum. I guess it depends on who had room. So when freedom came, new laws came. Of course, new laws came because now you got 4 million free blacks in this country now. So we've got to write laws to put them back in their place. So vagrancy laws came up. Vagrancies, you couldn't be just hanging out on the road or in the street. You had to have something to do. You had to have a job. You had to have a job. So if you were caught as a vagrant, you would go to jail or you would go to the insane asylum. If you were homeless, you were jailed. You would have to go to jail or you would go to the insane asylum. Those were two of the bigger reasons why they would either put you to jail or the insane asylum. Now, I'm going to tell you, most of the men would go to jail, and most of the women who found themselves in a vagrant or homeless or jobless would go to the insane asylum. There was also another reason that they would put you, most of the time for this particular reason, you went to the insane asylum. You didn't go to jail. And that reason was called religious excitement. What is religious excitement? Well, it is kind of almost like catching the Holy Ghost. So if these laws were in place today, as far as religious excitement, all of the black Pentecostal and Kojic churches would be in an insane asylum. So religious excitement was if you practice Christianity, but antithetical to how Europeans or white people practice it. For example, if you truly did your worship on Saturday, which is truly the Sabbath day, Sunday is the first day of the week, Saturday is the Sabbath. But if you worship on the Sabbath, then you would be considered someone who practiced religious excitement. If you were someone coming off of the plantation who worked with herbs, you may have been a healer on the plantation, you may have been the medicine man or the medicine woman on the plantation. If they found out that you were still working with herbs and you didn't trust these white doctors to take care of you, that was considered religious excitement because now religious excitement was just code word for witchcraft. That's what it was, code word for witchcraft. So you would, if you work with herbs and things of that nature, it could be considered religious excitement. If you claim to speak directly to Jesus, it was definitely religious excitement, and they could put you in an institution for that. So prior to the Civil War, you could go into an insane asylum for wanting to be free, for having the audacity to want freedom, for running away from your oppressor. You could definitely go to an insane asylum for that. After the Civil War, you could go to jail or the insane asylum for vagrancy, for homelessness, for joblessness. And then, of course, you could go for religious excitement, meaning you uh, may pray on Saturday instead of Sunday. You may lay claims that you speak directly to Jesus. We know back then, white folks, and some of them still think so today, ain't no Negro talking to Jesus. Jesus don't hear the prayers of black people. And I'm starting to believe that he doesn't, just based on history, uh, you know. But yeah. So, religious excitement. And I found out about this um, a few years ago, I think 2019. Um, my mother had passed away the year before. She joined the ancestors in 2018. And prior to her passing, her transition, I had started to um, look into my ancestral background. And we were having a family reunion that was coming up, and my uncle wanted me to do a storytelling of our family history. And so I was like, okay, cool. So I had access, access to ancestry.com. So I went through to see how far back I could go, and I pulled some census records, and I found my great 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 grandmother, and we had not known that we could go back that far for our family reunion. So I was able to present her, and that's my mom's side of the family. And then on my dad's side of the family, I said, well, let me check on daddy's side and see how far back I could go. And so I went back almost as far back as I could on my mom's side of the family, and I ran across my great grandmother, my father's um, grandmother. I ran across her death certificate. And her death certificate says that she died in Petersburg Central State Hospital, which was formerly called the Insane Asylum. It opened back in 1870. And a lot of people, again, these are newly freed Africans from bondage. So for them to open a building like that in 1870, it was certainly so they could house as many Black people and put them right back into a form of slavery once again. So I looked, I was like, oh my God, she was in the insane asylum. And I'm trying to think, I was like, what in the world was she there for? And my heart just broke. I looked at the date that she passed away. It was in July. She passed away on July 6th, 1928, and she was buried on July 8th. And so I'm just starting to put all these pieces in these puzzles together. My heart broke for my grandmother because my grandmother was like 20 years old, She had just given birth like 18 months prior to my father. My father was born. My father was 18 months old when his grandmother passed, so he never got a chance to meet her. Now, where my grandmother lived, in distance from where her mother was in the insane asylum, which is in Petersburg, Virginia. My grandmother lived in a small town called Union Level, Virginia, and it's in today's time. It's well, today's time, but it's about an hour away, hour and a half away from distance. Back then, my grandmother didn't have a phone, so I don't know how she would have gotten the word that her mother had passed, and if by time she got the word that she had already been buried, because there was no funeral. She died on the 6th of July. She was buried on the 8th. And my heart broke. So then I started to research. And I wanted to find out why she was admitted. And I started doing research on insanity or mental health and things of that nature. And that's when I ran across drapetomania and learned about that. And it was so crazy that while I was researching and trying to come up with reasons why she was there was a woman who was giving a talk at a library, and I went and I learned a lot of things about that. And I was like, all of the pieces were just coming together for me. And I was really trying to get information. I didn't know who to contact, if I could even go out to Petersburg Asylum to see if I could get information. So I was doing a show a few months later, and there was a man that was in the audience. And I always honor my ancestors in the show, and I don't know how, or even if I mentioned my great grandmother's name, I don't even remember. I just remember that at the end of the show, he came up to me and he said he wanted to talk to me. He said he was working on a project where he was digitizing some stories in the area and wanted to know if um, I could help him with telling some of the stories. And I was like, well, I'll give you a call. So he gave me his card, and his name was King Davis. Not Davis King, King Davis. Now, my mother's maiden name is King, and my father's last name is Davis. So when he gave me his card and I'm looking at it and it says King Davis, and then I look at where he's working, where he's doing the work, and it was Petersburg Central State Hospital, so the insane asylum. And I'm like, oh my God. It was like my great grandmother was like, here's the information. Just look it up, fool. So when I saw it, I told him that I had found some information about my great grandmother and I really wanted to find out more information. So he gave me his information again and he told me to email him with what I needed him to look up. So I emailed him and I asked if he could find any other records about her that I already had her death certificate. So he emailed me back with some information and he said, I can't find anything else other than what you already had there. He said, the only thing that strikes me as being odd is the reason for her admittance and the reason for her death. He said she was admitted for an infection, but she died from dehydration, from diarrhea. He said it doesn't make sense. He said why she would be admitted for an infection at an insane asylum. So then he gave me a list of things that he's seen before with people being admitted for that infection. And he said that a lot of times they're admitted because of religious excitement, which meant that my great grandmother was doing some stuff that they didn't like. Now, she had two daughters, and both of her daughters had spiritual gifts. Both of her daughters had the gift to dream. They could, both of them were, they could hear spirits, they could see spirits, they dreamed, and things of that nature. Both of her daughters worked with herbs and roots. My father worked with herbs and roots. He was definitely connected to the soil and the land. He was a farmer, so he was definitely connected to the soil and the land. So I'm thinking my great grandma was into some stuff. I remember that when my father was getting close to the end of his life, and I think he knew, he became very, 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 very spiritual. Not so much religious, but very, very spiritual. He would make teas and things that he would go and gather roots and herbs, and he would make teas and things. He started honoring the Sabbath on Saturday. He still went to church on Sunday, but he would fast on Saturday. And I'm thinking, where did he get that from? So I have to wonder if that's something that maybe my grandmother, his mother, did when they were younger. I don't know. But they have demonized our spirituality. They have demonized us since the beginning of time. And for the simple fact that they demonized the wanting of freedom and demonized how you choose to worship and who you choose to worship. And all of that is still carried through the descendants of those ancestors. All of that is still very much a part of our lives. And so it's no wonder that we, when we feel like there's mental issues going on in our lives or emotional issues going on in our lives, instead of going to someone who is certified to help us get through these things, the first place we want to run to is church. And we want to run to a church that we know is credible. There's been so many movies that there's always a line where, oh, black people don't go see no psychiatrist. We go to church. We talk to Jesus. And we can say that now in 2024, but in 1870, if you had said, I talked to Jesus, you'd have been put in an insane asylum. You'd have been put in an insane asylum. Blair Underwood did also a test for his ancestors, and he's from Petersburg, Virginia. And he found out that his great grandfather was also in the Central State Hospital in Petersburg around the same time my great grandmother was. And come to find out, it was for the same reason, for religious excitement. His great grandfather was known to be a conjure man. He was known to be someone who talked directly to God. And when people found that out, they put him in an insane asylum. Now, fortunately, he did not pass away there. He was there for a period of time, and this was after the Civil War, so he didn't have to go back to a plantation. But he had to be very careful of how he presented himself afterwards, and things that he could do, he had to keep under wraps and not let people know because it would have put him right back in the insane asylum. So yeah, so this I just wanted to come on today. Again, July. If you look at the banner, at the picture on the screen, it is a picture of a black man who looks appears to be a runaway slave. Look at the date. Look at the date. July. July. It's July. I don't know why July is set to be the month for mental health awareness. I don't know. But I just find it ironic. Well, I don't find it ironic. I find that the ancestors are speaking to us. So, Black people, if you have people in your family that show signs of um, heightened spiritual awareness, if they show signs of knowing things that maybe they shouldn't know, it's not insanity. It's not. It's spirituality, and they're just tapping into it, and it's probably something that is inherited. You just have to find out where the inheritance came from. All right, so again, we are honoring our ancestors who unfortunately had the misfortune of having their spirituality mistaken for insane, being insane and being crazy and mentally disturbed and mentally ill. Um, we think about Elijah McCoy, who was gifted, and he was, I won't even say mistaken. They used that as a scapegoat as an excuse for the patty rollers to unalive him. And so we have so many of our children who are uh, autistic and who are gifted and who have heightened spiritual awareness. And we have to be careful and we have to protect them at all costs, just like we would protect any of our other children who may be what they people would consider quote unquote normal. We have to protect our children. So look, until next time, you know the drill. Love yourself, love each other, give yourself some grace, give each other grace. Stay healthy, stay cool, and most of all, until next time, stay black. Peace, family.